it says on the programme, there is a politics of technology with regard to women, but I'm actually going to address it more. There is a politics of gender with respect to a gender analysis. Okay, so there is a politics of technology, and if it is to succeed, it must be intrinsically anti-patriarchal as well as anti-capitalist. And I'm going to start with a quote I'm going to read you, which says, "Technological change is starved of the so-called female values, such as intuition, subjectivity, tenacity and compassion. A profound contribution that could be made towards creativity in science and technology would not be to encourage the involvement of women in this field at all levels. Not, I must add, I'm sorry, that's not, I've got that completely wrong. That could be made towards creativity in science and technology would be to encourage the involvement of women in this field at all levels. Not, I must add, as imitation men, copying all the absurdness of men, but to challenge and counteract the male values built into the technology and to build in their own values." So, you may ask, who wrote that? Well, it was in fact a man, Mike Cooley, who was writing in 1980, and he was the leader of the Lucas Aerospace Combine Shop Stewards Committee, who in the 70s and 80s worked very hard on trying to convert conventional technology for common use. And I hope his name and the name of that group will come up more over this weekend because they're very important. And his work shows a number of things, especially that there's nothing so new in our current analysis of where the politics of technology is going. He pointed out as well that some researchers pointed out as early as the 1950s and 60s that computers increase the authoritarian control which an employer has over his employees. And I should also remark that he spent quite a lot of his working life around computers. And then the second thing is that thinking about the role of gender in politics of technology doesn't have to be just women's responsibility, and indeed it shouldn't be. Going back 400 years, briefly back, to talk about the scientific revolution, the fact about it is that it was a patriarchal initiative and that it was about disciplining and taming nature, which was held to be female, still is, I guess. But one of its key features was the appropriation of women's knowledge to create male experts, with a capital E. And this was documented very early in the women's liberation movement by a key pamphlet called Witches, Midwives and Nurses by Barbara Ehrenreich and Deirdre English. And if it's not in print at the moment, it certainly should be made available again. And I guess probably most of you know about what happened to witches and midwives and indeed nurses, and that from being respected members of the community, they had their knowledge extracted from them, and many of them were killed. Many of them, just midwives, became male doctors and gynecologists, and then like nurses, they became their, as it were, literally handmaidens. So basically, I suppose the message here is that it's not in men's interests either to perpetuate the sexual division of labour and the stealing of women's knowledge, which continues until today. And I'm also going to just give you an example of one of many that could be elaborated. And the one I'm going to talk about a little bit now is based on a talk that Connie Hunter of the Women's Environmental Network gave at one of the monthly gatherings, the Breaking the Frame gatherings.
That's 5 to go.
Oh God, yeah.
Okay.
I'm panicking already. She gave this talk at one of our monthly meetings that we had in London to prepare for this gathering, and also Cynthia Coburn gave a very interesting talk about gender and the politics of technology, and they're both up on the Breaking the Frame website. So Connie was talking quite a lot about GM and women farmers, especially in developing countries, and she was pointing out that even in that there's a growing movement of rural women speaking out very strongly against GM for a number of reasons, and that even in places where women are involved in cash cropping, women's lack of access to land, seed, tools, credit and extension services affects the adoption of technology, and that worldwide women receive only about 5% of agricultural extension services and own about 2% of land worldwide. So then another reason why women are organising against GM is that there is little evidence to suggest that women are inherently more conservative than men. However, as a result of gender division of labour, women and men hold different knowledges related to biodiversity. And in many cultures, it is women who choose, store and preserve seed to meet many different needs: food, fuel, fodder and medicinal purposes. And in many places, women's responsibilities for household food production have increased as a result of male out-migration, pandemics such as HIV and AIDS, and war. So I could say quite a bit more, but it's up there on the website, so it's really worth having a look at. So basically, the patriarchal mindset seems to exist across all aspects of technology, and it's clear that there's a lot of intersection between the different things. So, for example, with reproductive technology, particularly in surrogacy, where women are paid to have an embryo inserted so that they can give birth for other people, a particularly pernicious abuse of women is in India, where many women are kept as virtual prisoners in a kind of like battery hens for the 9 months that they're producing babies for people in the white third world. But interestingly enough, in the USA, where there are still some surrogate mothers doing it for pay, they like to use military wives because they're well disciplined and they move frequently. So then just another quick example or two from workplace politics about the ways that these things all intersect. That basically, when we talk about technology taking over people's jobs, it's very often traditionally women's jobs that are under threat. Secretaries and office work virtually disappeared. Supermarket checkouts, they're trying to force us out. Librarians. I was hearing last night about the way that caring is being robotised, which I just completely does my head in, and I hope we'll come back to that later. But that seems to me is the starkest example of removing humanity from our workplace. And of course, in Rana Plaza in Bangladesh and many other places around the world, most of the machinists were women. And it's true that neither men nor women should have to do boring, meaningless jobs, or when they do have to be done, we should all share them. But removing empathy and increasing alienation and breaking up communities seems to be a deliberate assault on the whole working class. And under patriarchy, women are left to pick up the pieces. So I was wondering whether this was why the Breaking the Frame London meeting on health and Big Pharma had the largest percentage of women apart from the gender one. And yes, thank you. Okay, I am just coming quite close to the end. Okay, so yes, and another example of the crossover is the rape, where rape and sexual assault are well-known weapons of war. But in the Congo, it's a war over the rare minerals which are used in the production of digital technology. And then the final point that I would like to make, sorry, not wishing to depress you all too much, that the pornification of society that we're seeing seems to me and to a lot of us is down to the complete domination of online pornography, and that younger and younger people, and particularly boys, are accessing it. And that one of the most horrible statistics that I've heard lately is that the area of life where there's been the greatest rise of sexual violence and domestic violence is amongst teenagers. And in fact, fairly recently, the ex-editor of Loaded, which was one of these sort of mildly pornographic magazines, he made a TV programme about the pornification of society and what it was doing to young men. And what I thought was particularly poignant and interesting was that he felt moved to do this when he had a son, and that his son was 4 years old, and he suddenly realised that, you know, oh my goodness me, this, you know, what I was doing before is not really helping my child into the world. And so I think this is a very good example of the way that we have to address the whole patriarchal structure when we're looking at the politics of technology.
Right. Good.